So, I've been asked to tackle Peter Chiarelli. No problem. But before we get into Chiarelli, I need to look at where they've come from. So let's take a look at where the Oilers came from. This is from the 2014-15 guide. There's Ryan Miller, his first year in Vancouver. He looks happy. He's all set to take over the world. He has no idea what's going to happen. They actually got in the playoffs that first year. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And if it is, introduce another off-season facelift. No need to guess which category the Oilers fall into as they enter year 9 of the rebuild. I was hoping there wouldn't be dismantlement this year at the end of the year, said GM Craig McTavish. All these moves are going to go a long way to addressing a serious shortcoming in our on-ice performance. Sam Gagner, Ales Hemsky, and Ryan Smith are among the regulars who are gone, while assistant coaches Kelly Buchberger and Steve Smith are also out. Inner Benoit Pouliot and Teddy Purcell up front, and Nikita Keaton, Mark Fane, and Keith Ollie on the back end. Craig Ramsey was added to the coaching staff. So that's where we were at the year before. The year before Chiarelli came in. And you look at the lineup, and here it is. So this is the year they're talking about. This is 13-14. Don't worry about what's on the right side of the screen. We'll get to that in a bit. So 13-14, your number one scorer is Hall with 80 points, 23 goals. Jordan Eberle second with 65 points. David Perron at 57. Nugent Hopkins at 56, followed by Gagner, Schultz, Yakupov, Smith, Gordon, Acabello, and Ferentz. The interesting thing is their goaltending. Fast, Brizgalov, Scrivens, Bachman, LaBarbera, and Dubnyk all spent time in this roster as their goaltenders. And it was mostly a disaster. It was really mostly a disaster. And Oilers fans remember this, right? Ads. So ads going into this season, the last season that we'd see McTavish in charge. Benoit Pouliot, Leon Draisaitl as a draft pick, Teddy Purcell, Mark Fane, Nikita Nikitin, and Keith Ollie. And so continued a tradition of having a blue line that wasn't very good. So after another season of this mire, this muck, the Oilers have had enough. So as we go into, where is it? Here it is, 15-16. They make the number smaller every year and they move it. It's obnoxious. The Edmonton Oilers have been trying for 9 years now to break the cycle of misery and failure that makes them a perennial lottery team with virtually zero success. This is the year after. This isn't the same one being read twice. They were worse last year than they were 8 seasons ago, so instead of blowing up the roster, the Oilers went a different direction this summer, blowing up the guys in charge of building the roster. Not literally. They didn't actually blow them up. In a dramatic and relentless gutting, the Oilers' president of hockey operations, GM coach, 3 assistant coaches, head pro scout, and head amateur scout were among those replaced. After 6 years, 6 coaches in 7 years, the Oilers signed Todd McClellan to a 5-year deal. After Kevin Lowe, Steve Tambellini, and Craig McTavish all showed inexperience during stints as GM, they hired Peter Chiarelli. And in the biggest and luckiest move of all, they won Connor McDavid in the draft lottery. So yes, fans in Edmonton are very excited. And out that year were Boyd Gordon, Martin Marincin, Victor Fast, Matt Fraser, who was brought in during the season, and Steve Pinizzotto. The additions, of course, Connor McDavid, Laurie Korpikoski, I totally Don Cherry'd that, Mark Letestu, Eric Gryba, infamously Griffin Reinhardt, free agent additions. Anders Nilsson was a free agent, and Cam Talbot was traded for. We'll get to him in a minute. And then we get to the preview for this season. And this is important before we get into last year's stats. This is a preview for this season. A month ago, this is what people were saying. After a decade of misery, failure, and lottery picks, the Oilers have emerged at last as a Stanley Cup contender. The painful 10-year rebuild finally showed significant progress, with Edmonton making the playoffs for the first time since 2006, finishing the season with 103 points and advancing to the second round. At the heart of the resurrection, of course, is Connor McDavid, who scored 100 points in his sophomore season, capturing the Art Ross Trophy, Hart Trophy, and Ted Lindsay Award. But a strong supporting cast also made a huge impact. Leon Draisaitl established himself as an elite forward. Cam Talbot emerged as a top-tier workhorse goalie. Milan Lucic and Patrick Maroon combined for 50 goals and 463 pounds of much-needed muscle, and a blue line that had long been a liability was transformed into a strength. As a result, a team that had been considered a laughingstock for 10 years is now a Stanley Cup contender. The challenges for the Oilers will be not only duplicating a season in which everything went right, but improving on it. And when it talks about their defense, it says, Oilers GM Peter Chiarelli shored up what had been a major issue in Edmonton, building a blue line that had helped cut the team's goals against from 27th to 8th. The trade that sent Taylor Hall to New Jersey for Adam Larsson was ridiculed at first, but Larsson was a godsend in his first season in Edmonton. He steadies his own end of the ice with a smart, calm, and aggressive presence that the Oilers desperately needed. Andre Sekera and Chris Russell also delivered strong, steady minutes, while an injury-free Oscar Klefbom finally blossomed into the top-pairing defenseman the Oilers envisioned when they signed him to a 7-year contract in 2015. Sekera will be sidelined with a knee injury for the first chunk of the regular season, so the defense core will have its depth tested. The Brass. Chiarelli is not afraid to make a big move, as evidenced by the fact high draft picks Hall, Eberle, and Yakupov have all been traded away, while coach Todd McClellan has the team playing a more complete and responsible style. The result is an entirely new-look organization. Oh, I'm not getting into the stats behind me. Not yet. We are not getting into those just yet. Now, I get that Chiarelli's taking a lot of flack, but let's look at his trades, and we'll just keep track of how he's done. The first trade he made was to acquire Griffin Reinhardt for a first and second round pick. We know that Matt Barzal was the first round pick that went to the Islanders. Huge loss. I will not make an excuse for this. Griffin Reinhardt is not an NHL defenseman. Vegas proved that. So that conversation's done. But then a day later, he acquires Cam Talbot and a 7th round pick for a 2nd, 3rd, and 7th. Cam Talbot was the goaltender Edmonton hadn't had in a very long time. He had put up good numbers for the last 2 seasons in New York, and he put up good numbers in Edmonton his first 2 years there. This season, we'll get into, but not yet. He then traded Martin Marincin and Brad Ross to Toronto for a 4th round pick. He then acquired Eric Gryba for Travis Ewanick, and a 4th round pick in 2015, so he just took that pick and turned it into Eric Gryba. Then he grabbed Korpikoski, I'm not Don Cherry, I swear, for Gordon, which was a whatever trade. He acquired Anders Nilsson from Chicago for Liam Coughlin, which is a win. He then traded away Ben Scrivens for Zach Kassian, which was a win before this season, and again, I'll get into all this in a minute. Philip Larson was then traded away to Vancouver. They weren't going to use him anyways, for a 5th round pick in this past draft. Justin Schultz was traded to Pittsburgh for a 3rd round pick. Is that a loss? Absolutely. Teddy Purcell goes to Florida for a 3rd round pick. Is that a loss? Not really. Nilsson was traded away for Nicholas Lundstrom and a 5th round pick in 2016. Nilsson didn't factor into their plans. Patrick Maroon was acquired from Anaheim for Martin Gernat and a 2016 4th round pick. Last spring, we were talking about what a steal this was. How Anaheim had been embarrassed in this trade. How Chiarelli had ripped the Ducks off big time for Maroon. Taylor Hall is then traded away to New Jersey for Adam Larsson, a solid stay-at-home defenseman who puts up relatively decent point totals for a stay-at-home defenseman. And Taylor Hall had been viewed as the guy who was okay with losing. Whether that's true or it's not true, that was the view. Nail Yakupov's traded away to St. Louis for a conditional 3rd round pick and some kid named Zach that'll never play in the NHL. See, I say that and then he will, right? They then acquire Henrik Samuelsson for Mitchell Moroz. They acquired David Desharnais for Brandon Davidson. They acquired Justin Fontaine for Taylor Beck. But here it is. Jordan Eberle for Ryan Strome. Now we can discuss their current scoring statistics. And again, what we want to do here is we want to compare, not apples to oranges, we want to compare what the Oilers had to what the Oilers have. So, here's your 16-17 stats. Okay? So here's McDavid with 100 points. This year he has 13 points in 11 games. Draisaitl, 82 games, 77 points. This year he's missed 4. Has 8 points in 7 games. Jordan Eberle, 51 points last year, is gone. Ryan Strowman, his place, has 1 goal, 5 points. He's on pace for about 38 points. He's on pace for 7 goals. This is well below Eberle. Lucic, 50 points last year, 23 goals. This year, in 11 games, he has 5 points, 1 goal, same as Strome. This, right here, is a major reason why Edmonton's stepping back. I still got more to get into. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, 11 games, 5 goals, 2 assists, 7 points. He's had a good start to the season. Patrick Maroon, we expected a fall back from him. He's got 9 points in 11 games. He's not falling back. But Clefbaum, 11 games, 2 points. That's a far cry from the 38-point pace he had last year. Letestu had 35 points last year. He's got 2 this year. He's on pace for 14. Cassian, 1 point in 11 games. Larson, 2 points in 11 games. He's a stay-at-home defenseman, but he did score 19 points last year, and losing those points off the blue line does make a difference. And Sekera. Sekera hasn't played a game yet. It's funny how, when you look at all this, we'll give a team a pass for not having Erik Karlsson. Focus. We'll give a team a pass for not having Erik Karlsson. We'll give the Wild or the Blues a pass for not having a full, healthy lineup. But the Oilers right now, we can't wait to roast Chiarelli for the Eberle for Strome deal. As if Eberle was tearing the league up last year, which he wasn't. And he didn't in the playoffs. Now, I mean, I knew Eberle was on his way out. Just like I knew Hall made sense being traded. My point is this. Compare the stats here, okay, to the stats on the other side of the board. Okay, so I'll move this back a bit. This team and this team score relatively the same, but there's more depth. Down here, you're getting into Gordon, Arcobello, and Ference. And I liked Ference a lot, and I liked Arcobello, and I didn't have a problem with Boyd Gordon, but compared to Sekera, Cassian, and Larson, this is a stronger depth team. In net, you got Talbot, Brossoit, and Gustafsson. Gustafsson was out by the end of the season. Brossoit was in as the backup. Here you've got 6 guys. Here's the thing. So I'm sure people have noticed at the top of the board, I've got Cam Talbot's stats. Last year, he's a 2.39 goals against and a 919 save percentage. This year, it's a 3.10 and a 904 save percentage. So here's the thing. It's very easy. Let me just go ahead and move that down. It's very easy to roast Chiarelli right now. And I understand why people are doing it. The Eberle for Strome trade is a disaster. And already the Lucic contract looks like it's going to be a buyout. Now, Lucic is a funny guy. And I don't mean funny in a good way. Lucic would have a great season in Boston, and I would be chanting Luch as loud as anybody. And then the next year, he'd be a disaster. Taking stupid penalties, not scoring, being moody, whatever. He was a disaster. This is what you get with him. He can turn it around. He could go, on his next 20 games, he could score 8 goals, and this is all forgotten by the All-Star break. But that's the danger with Luch. When they got rid of Hall, Lucic came in to be that physical presence on the wing, and ideally he was going to play with McDavid. That didn't work. When Lucic didn't work with McDavid, it forced Draisaitl up onto that wing. Draisaitl right now should be that number 2 center. He's not. It's been RNH. And Nugent-Hopkins is putting up decent totals right now. But honestly, Nugent-Hopkins as a number 3 center behind Draisaitl and Connor McDavid would be deadly. When you pull Nugent-Hopkins up to second, you don't have that depth at center. You can't roll your 4 lines. So when you can't roll your lines, and Cassian's not scoring, and Clefbaum's not getting points on the blue line, so that means that it's affecting your power play, it's affecting everything. You've got Lucic is not scoring very well. Strome is not filling in for Eberle. It cascades on itself. So how much of this is on Chiarelli? Now, I read on Vice Sports, and I shouldn't have because it gave me a headache. They talked about the Draisaitl contract, and they said he had 1 good year, and they gave him X amount of dollars, and then Pasternak came in at $6 million, and that's what Leon Draisaitl should have got paid. You know, damn that Chiarelli. See, when Pastrnak got signed, I praised Sweeney for signing Pastrnak for below market value. Pastrnak is a bargain. Draisaitl, is he overpaid? Probably, but he's got 8 points in 7 games right now. And that's with coming back from a concussion, when you could totally say, oh, well, his points are down, because they're not down. He's still on pace for, as long as he doesn't get hurt again, he should get 20 goals. He should get almost 80 points. He's supposed to be a second-line center. They paid him as a second-line center. Was that smart? Maybe. The other option would have been this. Chiarelli waits, Pastrnak signs, and then Draisaitl's agent says, yeah, no, we're not going to take that. You're left with Draisaitl holding out. How much worse would this be for Edmonton if Draisaitl had held out? Without Draisaitl in the lineup, how much worse is their record? How much depth of scoring do they have? And how much of this is on the GM? How many of these guys in a slump is on the GM? Is Sekera's injury on the GM? Because Sekera played 80 games last year at 35 points, and he was a big part of that blue line. And nobody's replaced him. So it's easy to talk about Chiarelli and the mistakes he's made. It is. And when you look at cap friendly, yeah, there's issues. And I'll take a look at that. All right, so I got them loaded up on cap friendly, and let's take a look. So yeah, Draisaitl's at 8.5. Lucic is at 6 until 2023. That was what his asking price was. The Oilers paid it. If the Oilers hadn't, the Canucks would have. If the Canucks had signed Lucic, it's very possible the Oilers would have turned back and signed Louis Eriksson instead. It would not have been better if they'd signed Louis Eriksson. Nugent Hopkins, $6 million a year is over in 2021. That's 4 years. The $2.5 million of Ryan Strom's comes off the books this summer, and odds are he gets a decrease in pay if the Oilers keep him around. So that's $2.5 million under the cap. Cassian's at 1.9 for the next 3 years. Is it high? Absolutely. I've never been a Zach Cassian fan. I'm not going to pretend to be. Letestu expires at 1.8. Mareun expires at 1.5. He's going to want a huge raise, and he'll get it. And he won't stay in Edmonton. But Patrick Mareun, if you're going to say, well, if they can't sign Patrick Mareun, then that's a mistake. Well, Mareun was brought in by Chiarelli. So you're going to give him credit for one, and you're going to damn him on the other. This is the problem. Jokinen is a free agent. He's at 1.1. Slepishev's a free agent, but he's only $925 grand, and he's not going to get a raise, not based on his stats right now. Kajula's at $925 grand. How much of a raise is he going to get? And you've got Pakarinen's at $725. So next year, the Connor McDavid $12.5 million a year extension kicks in. Sekera's got 3 years left at that point. Klefbom's got 5. He's got 5 more years after this one. Adam Larson's got 3, and Russell's got 3. Now, combined, these guys cost $17 million. Are they worth $17 million? I'm not going to claim that they are at all. Matt Benning expires this summer. He's an RFA. He's not going to get a big raise. Not based on the way he's played early this season. If he stays at all. Greiba's got 2 more years at $900 grand. No concern with him getting a raise. Darnell Nurse, RFA this summer, May. Avitu, $700 grand. He's a throw-in for now. Talbot's got 2 more years left at 4.16, including this season, so he'll be a free agent in 2019. Brossois a free agent next summer. He won't get a big raise. And Mark Fane, who is buried in the minors, he's a UFA this summer as well. So when you look at next year, their salary carryover, they've got 13 players at $65 million. That's not great. Those are Washington numbers. But remember, when they paid Draisaitl, there were a lot of people who agreed that was the price Draisaitl was going to cost. When Draisaitl was out, and we were spitballing where he was going to end up, we all said $8.5 million a year seemed to be the basic standard for where we thought he was going to end up. Yeah, but it ended up at 8.5. We can argue about his market value and compare him to Pastrnak. I just think that Don Sweeney waited long enough with Pastrnak. And if Chiarelli'd waited longer, Draisaitl could have ended up going home, and we'd be looking at a far worse situation in Edmonton. There are moves they can make. There are guys they can get rid of. There are buyouts that will take place. I know Chiarelli's not great at contracts. I'm well aware of that. And when you look, there's a no movement clause for Milan Lucic. There's a modified no trade clause for Jokinen, and I'm not sure how that happens. There's a no movement clause for Chris Russell, no movement clause for Sekera, but that's really it. There's a no movement clause for Talbot, but where's Talbot going to go? If Talbot can take that 904 and turn it back into a 919, if some of these guys who aren't scoring right now, whether it's Strome, it's Lucic, Clefbaum, Letestu, Larson, Cassian, if these guys can even get up to last year's pace and give that support to Connor McDavid, who's been struggling despite his offensive totals being fantastic. He's on pace for about 95 points this year. But you can tell he's frustrated. You can see it in his game. You can see it when you watch an Oilers game. He's frustrated, and he's feeling that pressure to have to do it by himself. And that is not something you want to see with a guy who's a generational player. And he's not showing those generational totals right now. When I talk about leading scorers in the NHL, he's not there right now. And he's not showing any signs of catching up to those guys in front of him. So we'll see what happens from here. But again, in terms of Chiarelli's job, I think he's done relatively well. I understand. I get it. I get that people want to crucify him, and they complain about the job he did in Boston. And what I'll say from the job he did in Boston was there were some good moves, there were some horrible moves, and in the end, they won a Stanley Cup in 2011. And Chiarelli came in, and he made the right moves to make that happen. Maybe he's a GM that comes in, does quick hits, gets you a couple of really good years, and then you're crap after. But if those really good years gets you a Stanley Cup, if this team wins a Stanley Cup, not this year, but next year, if Chiarelli's still at the helm, he has to get the credit. And you have to give him the credit for last season because he put that team together. You can turn around and say, well, it's just because he's got McDavid. They've got McDavid now. They're near the bottom of the league. It's still the same Connor. He's not hurt. So, it's the same Connor. He doesn't have the supporting staff that he had last year. He doesn't have the guys helping to pick up the slack. There's nobody you have to worry about in Edmonton. If you're playing the Oilers right now, you just say, all right, shut down McDavid and Draisaitl. They're done. Yeah, you'll probably allow points to Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, but you'll let him score one if you know you're not going to have to worry about Connor getting a hat trick. So that's where they're at. For me, I really don't see Chiarelli being under the gun. And if they fire him for the Strome move, if they fire him because Eberle became Strome, A, people are looking at Eberle's job last year through rose-colored glasses, and B, fans are really micromanaging the general manager a little bit here. And I would not put Chiarelli's job right now, the job that he's done, in top 5 for the last 6 months. Because there were weaknesses on this team that were exposed against the Ducks that he didn't address. Yes, the blue line needed more depth. Yes, they needed more scoring depth. Some of these totals put up by these guys were overachieving. Maybe they've fallen back to reality. And he should have been able to do something. But again, you're asking him to predict the future. And if he trades out guys who just had career years, fans are going to be on him again. A GM job is the most thankless job in sports. Because no matter what you do, you have thousands of people who are sure you made a mistake every move. And it's weird and it's strange to me, but it's how hockey works. It's how sports works. I watch it in football and baseball and every sport it happens. Would I say that he's been a good GM for the Oilers? Absolutely. Would I say he's a smart GM? I would say that in terms of trading, he's even. Other than the Eberle trade, which really stands out. But in terms of the job he's done, he's been good. And I'm not going to look at his draft picks because he hasn't been there that long. So it's too early to look at draft classes that he's done. It's not like Garth Snow where I can look back at drafts for the last 10 years. He's only been in Edmonton for a few years. So anybody who expects him to get fired, I think is probably expecting a lot. And when I read some of these criticisms online, I'm baffled. Because these are criticisms that at different points in time could have been thrown at Jim Rutherford. They could have been thrown at Ray Shero at times. Any GM has gone through these periods where they've appeared to be doing a bad job. Lou Lamoriello in New Jersey at times just looked like a disaster. So there is a lack of patience with some fans, and there is micromanagement that goes on in terms of how people view GMs. But I'm telling you, this Oilers team is closer to winning than this one was. The Oilers went in the right direction. And if they fire Chiarelli, who do you replace him with? Who do you replace him with, and how do you fix it? And if you buy out Lucic, well, then who's out there playing physical? This team was soft. This was a soft team. Justin Schultz wasn't making any headway in Edmonton. The idea that they should have just held on to Justin Schultz and done what? There's no guarantee he would have broke through the way he did last year in Pittsburgh. And, interesting side note, Schultz has not played with that same offensive flair that he showed last year in Pittsburgh this year. He may be a one-year wonder for Pittsburgh. So, it's really easy to Monday morning quarterback, and there is some of that goes on with Chiarelli. I like him. I like his moves. He's not the best GM in the league, but I think he's given Edmonton a chance to win. And really, with so many injuries and so many guys not, like Clefbaum wasn't expected to fall back like this. Sekera's out. Cassian's not playing, well. This is the Cassian that I wanted out of Vancouver. And Larson offensively's fallen back. All it takes is a few of those guys to start putting pucks in the net, whether it's Strome or it's Lucic or it's Cassian, and suddenly they look great and everybody's going to be happy again. But it's really early in the season to be writing them off. I haven't written the Oilers off because I still think when you've got a player like McDavid, you've got a very good chance of making the Stanley Cup playoffs. Is it crazy? Probably. But I've been called crazy before. Let me know what you guys think in the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And if Peter Chiarelli were watching this, I'd tell him to keep his head up. Because there's probably people throwing tomatoes at him and bricks and anything else right now. But, again, it's not that this team changed so much from the one that was in the second round last year. It's there's a lot of guys who are underperforming, including their goaltending. So once that starts to come into form, I really think they'll turn it around. And thankfully, they're in a division where turning it around really isn't as difficult as it is in others. Vancouver will fall back. Vegas has started falling back. All it takes is playing above 500, and they can get back in the conversation. Then they have to worry about LA, Calgary, San Jose, and Anaheim. And Anaheim hasn't torn apart the division yet. San Jose's been inconsistent, and so is Calgary. So all they got to do is go on a nice little run with one of these guys starting to score. And when they get Sekera back, it could change the entire complexity of the team. Their whole complexion could change. So let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.